In 1943, the United States Navy introduced a fighter that would quietly change the balance of the Pacific War. It was not the fastest aircraft of the war. It was not the most elegant. And it was certainly not the most famous. But within 2 years, this aircraft would destroy more enemy planes than any other naval fighter in history. This was the F6F Hellcat. To understand why the Hellcat mattered so much, we need to go back to the beginning of the Pacific War. December 1941, Japan struck across the Pacific with astonishing speed. Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, Malaya, the Dutch East Indies. Everywhere Allied pilots encountered the same terrifying opponent in the sky, the Mitsubishi A6M Zero. The Zero was light, extremely maneuverable, and in the hands of experienced Japanese pilots, it was deadly. Early American fighters struggled against it. Pilots flying the F4F Wildcat quickly discovered a brutal reality. Trying to outturn the Zero was a mistake. In a turning fight, the Japanese fighter almost always had their advantage. But the Zero had weaknesses. Weaknesses that American engineers were quick to study. Unlike many American aircraft, the Zero carried very little armor. Its fuel tanks were not self-sealing, and the aircraft was designed for agility and range rather than durability. That meant one thing: if the Zero was hit hard enough, it burned. The United States Navy understood that the Pacific War would not be decided in a few quick battles. It would be a long industrial war. And in a long war, survivability matters more than elegance. What the Navy needed was a fighter that could take damage, carry heavy weapons, and still dominate the skies above the fleet. The company tasked with building that fighter was Grumman. Grumman already had experience designing carrier aircraft. Their earlier fighter, the F4F Wildcat, had performed far better than expected against Japanese aircraft. But the Navy wanted something more powerful, something faster, something capable of overwhelming Japanese fighters entirely. The result was the F6F Hellcat. At first glance, the Hellcat looked large, much larger than the Zero. Fully loaded, it weighed nearly 6 tons. That was significantly heavier than its Japanese rival. But that weight brought strength. Armor protected the pilot. Self-sealing fuel tanks reduced the risk of fire. And the aircraft structure was strong enough to survive combat damage that would destroy lighter fighters. The Hellcat was built with a simple philosophy. A fighter that survives the fight can win the war. Powering the aircraft was the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, a massive radial engine capable of producing more than 2,000 horsepower. This gave the Hellcat excellent climbing power and strong acceleration. Its maximum speed reached around 380 miles per hour. Not the fastest of the war, but more than enough for naval combat. Then there was the firepower. 6 50 caliber machine guns mounted in the wings, each capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute. Against lightly built Japanese aircraft, Even a short burst could be devastating. Hellcat pilots quickly learned that they did not need to outturn the Zero. They simply needed to strike hard and fast. Using altitude and speed, American pilots developed tactics that avoided the Zero's strengths. They would dive from above, fire a burst, and climb away before the enemy could respond. This became known as energy fighting, and the Hellcat was perfect for it. But an aircraft alone does not win a war. Pilots do. And by 1943, American pilot training had begun to change dramatically. Early in the war, many U.S. pilots had limited combat experience. But as the war progressed, training programs expanded. New pilots arrived better prepared, better trained, and equipped with a fighter that gave them the advantage. Meanwhile, Japan faced a different problem. Their early war success had relied heavily on highly experienced pilots, men who had spent years mastering aerial combat. But those pilots could not be replaced quickly. Every loss weakened the Japanese air arm. And by the time the Hellcat entered combat in large numbers, many of Japan's best aviators had already been lost. The Hellcat first saw major action in 1943. Almost immediately, American pilots noticed the difference. The aircraft was stable, forgiving, and extremely rugged. Pilots often returned to their carriers with damage that would have destroyed other fighters. Bullet holes, damaged control surfaces, sometimes entire sections of the aircraft missing. Yet the Hellcat kept flying. As the Pacific War progressed, American carrier forces began advancing across the ocean. Island by island, base by base. With every step forward, Hellcat fighters protected the fleet from enemy aircraft. They escorted bombers, intercepted incoming raids, and swept the skies ahead of amphibious landings. Where the Hellcat appeared, Japanese air power struggled to survive. The moment that truly demonstrated the Hellcat's dominance came in June 1944, during the Battle of the Philippine Sea. This battle pitted American carrier forces against Japan's remaining naval aviation strength. By this stage of the war, Hellcats formed the backbone of U.S. carrier fighter squadrons. Wave after wave of Japanese aircraft attempted to attack the American fleet. But American radar detected them early. Hellcat fighters launched to intercept. Their result was devastating. Japanese aircraft were shot down in huge numbers. So many, in fact, that American pilots began calling the battle the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Hundreds of Japanese aircraft were destroyed in a single day, many before they ever reached the American fleet. The battle effectively ended Japan's ability to conduct large-scale carrier air operations. From that point forward, Japanese naval aviation never fully recovered. And the Hellcat played a central role in that outcome. By the end of World War II, the F6F Hellcat had achieved extraordinary results. American records credited it with destroying more than 5,000 enemy aircraft. Its overall kill ratio approached 19 victories for every aircraft lost in combat. Those numbers made it one of the most successful naval fighters in history. But the Hellcat story is not simply about statistics. It represents something larger, a shift in how modern wars are fought. Japan entered the war with highly trained pilots and elegant aircraft designs. But their industrial capacity was limited. The United States, by contrast, built aircraft that were strong, practical, and easy to produce in large numbers. More than 12,000 Hellcats rolled off American production lines during the war. Every one of them built for the brutal realities of carrier warfare. In the end, the Hellcat was not the most glamorous fighter of World War II. It did not have the legendary reputation of aircraft like the Spitfire or the Mustang. But in the skies above the Pacific Ocean, it did something even more important. It gave the United States Navy control of the air. And once that control was secured, the path across the Pacific became clear. Island by island, battle by battle, until the war finally reached the shores of Japan itself. The Zero may have dominated the early years of the Pacific War. But by the middle of the conflict, a new aircraft had taken its place in the sky. Stronger, heavier, and built for the long war ahead. That aircraft was the F6F Hellcat.